Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. My name is Gary Pinkerton and I co-host this show with Jason Hartman.
This is Heroic Investing, episode 193. Today my guest is Dr. Victor Hanson. Dr. Hanson is an American classicist. He's a military historian, columnist, and a farmer of land that has been in his family in California for generations. He's been a commentator on modern and ancient warfare and contemporary politics for National Reviews, the Washington Times, and other media outlets. I talk more about his background in the episode, and it runs a bit long, so if you don't mind, let's just get to this interview with Dr. Victor Hanson. And I'm extremely excited to welcome a pretty incredible and accomplished military historian, professor, and many other things. Dr. Hanson, thank you so much, Dr. Victor Hanson, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, as I mentioned before we started the taping, I will have preceded this with a few more details about your background, but I love for the audience to be able to hear it from the guests themselves. Would you please just explain a little bit about your history, your past, what got you into the love and vocation that you've carried for many years?
Well, I grew up in the house that I'm speaking from right now, the fifth generation on a small farm in Central California. I went to local public high school, and then they had opened up recently a University of California campus at Santa Cruz. I was there, and I majored in classical languages. So I did that for 4 years. I went to Greece, studied archaeology, and then I got a PhD from Stanford in classical languages. And then at 26, I came home to help my grandparents farm, and I did that for 5 years, full-time, trees and vines. And then I went to the nearby Cal State Fresno campus and started a classics program. I did that for 21 years. And then I went to Stanford's Hoover Institution, where I've worked for the last 16 years. And I commute once a week. I have an apartment on the Stanford campus from my farm here in Selma, California. And written or edited about 24 books. And I write the Tribune syndication and National Review and the new online magazine, American Greatness.
Wow. It is, listeners, you must go to his website, and I'll just put it out now in case we forget later, but victorhanson.com. Just some tremendous titles on here. Many of them are on military history, wars. Maybe, perhaps your most well-known, the Second World Wars, a really extensive look at the subtitle, the first global conflict and how it was fought and won. What got you so interested in military history?
Well, I was a classical scholar, and I was trained to be a textual critic of Greek and Latin text. And I didn't enjoy it all that much by the time I was finishing graduate school. So for my thesis, I wanted to write about something I knew growing up on a farm, and then also I was always interested in military history as a kid. So I wrote a thesis called Warfare and Agriculture in Ancient Greece about the wartime tactic of destroying the agriculture of an enemy. It's kind of an esoteric. It was published, but it wasn't a bestseller, obviously. And so out of that classics, I started writing about Roman and Greek warfare, and then medieval warfare, then modern warfare, and then world warfare. And so it was just a natural progression, although I still write about the ancient world, but not nearly as much as I used to.
Got it. What would you say, knowing kind of the makeup of the audience before your most recent release, and we'll jump to that a second, but that one aside, all of the books on military history, which do you think the audience should read first, they should dive into first?
Well, the two that have sold the best were a book I wrote in 2002 called Carnage and Culture, Landmark Battles in Western Civilization. And by that, it was just why did Western armies from Greece to the medieval period, the Crusades, or the Cortez, or the British Empire, why were they able to project force so far away from their own homeland so effectively? And I went through the values that made up a lot of the assumptions of Western military. And then I wrote a book 2 years ago called Second World Wars, about how World War II was fought in the air, on the ground, beneath the sea, and on top of the sea. And then I wrote a book called Ripples of Battle. That was my favorite book. It was how does a battle change history, not politically, but affect the people that are in it. And I picked 3 battles, an ancient one, a Civil War battle, and a modern one on Okinawa. And I tried to show that out of that fighting, certain authors, musicians, politicians became famous or infamous, and that or got killed or survived. And a battle like Shiloh really changed American history, but not necessarily in altering the course of the Civil War, but creating people like William Tecumseh Sherman, or the Lew Wallace, the author of Ben-Hur, which was sort of a paradigm or a simile of what he had experienced at Shiloh. But that book, for some reason, didn't sell as well as the other ones. So I think Ripples of Battle is the one that I like the best.
Nice. I appreciate you taking me through it. I was looking at that title while you were describing the Second World Wars, wondering specifically what that was. In the Ripples of Battle, you talk, as you said, about the impact it had on individuals, some specific individuals, famous individuals, and they were all physically in those battles. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Ernie Pyle was killed, the famous war correspondent on Okinawa. That had a tremendous effect. The novelist and memorist E.B. Sledge was on Okinawa, and what he felt was very important. And there were certain people there whose descriptions of Okinawa so terrified or shocked the country, what they had experienced, especially in May, June, and July, that it was pretty clear that after that battle they were going to drop the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
Because in July they didn't ever want to go through an Okinawa again. And so I talked about that and some of the commanders that were there and the effects that it had on their lives, and then later on other people. It had an effect on my life because my father's first cousin, whom they adopted as his brother, was killed there, and I was named after him. So I grew up sort of, you've always got to be a 6'3" U.S. hero like he was, but it was very hard to, But it was sort of how battles ripple out and affect us in ways we'd have no idea, that we don't really appreciate.
It's certainly that battle and the Second World War certainly shaped America forever forward. That's amazing. Let's change, though, to a topic that seems that you've started a new focus. I'm sure it's very much related. And this book is your most recent, not yet out, I think, right?
No, it's been out for a month. Actually, it's been on the New York Times bestseller for 5 weeks. I'm pretty lucky on that.
I'm so sorry. That's awesome, and congratulations. Yep.
Thank you.
I don't spend much time, unfortunately, looking at those. But the title of this is The Case for Trump. And I take it in reading the excerpt from it. Certainly, it's a book that I'm going to go get as soon as we're finished here. It's a topic that really interests me. It is a very polarizing political environment we've been in for the last few years. I take from my reading of it that you are fairly pro on Mr. Trump and what he's trying to do for America.
Yeah, I think it is, but I didn't want to make him into a saint or sinner, and I looked at the genre of Trump books, and they were all pretty emotional. So what I wanted to do was just analyze how a guy without political or military experience defeated 16 really skilled Republican politicians, governors, senators, corporate CEOs in 2016. Then he went on to defeat the best funded candidate in the history of politics, Hillary Clinton, who had mostly a supportive media culture behind her. And then, contrary to expectations, in terms of the analytics of the first 2.25 years of governance, whether we look at record low unemployment for minorities or near record unemployment for everybody, or annualized GDP growth or energy production, that he's got a pretty good record, deregulation, and that wasn't supposed to happen. And so it's an analysis of the United States and why he got elected. How did he tweak a traditional Republican agenda that had been, he followed pretty closely, always lower taxes, less government, stronger military, strict instructions judges. But on that blueprint, he tweaked it and he said, China's not fated to run the world and they're cheating, and that's the basis of their success in trade and commerce, and we're going to stop it. The middle of the country is hollowed out, but it doesn't have to be. We have good workers, cheap energy, we're competitive. We have a good trade system that's fair rather than just free, we'll do okay. And we can't have a sovereign nation with an open border. And immigration's got to be, measured and meritocratic and legal and diverse. And finally, if you're going to go overseas and get into an optional military engagement, make sure that the success in Kabul or Baghdad or Tripoli or in Syria can translate to long-term American strategic advantage and a cost-benefit analysis. And nobody had really said that, but those issues were tailor-made to where the elections are always decided, these latest elections, that is in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida. He won the Electoral College that way. And then most people had no clue or no thought that he could ever do that. They were completely shocked the day after the election. And then they thought he was so chaotic, first president without political and military experience, I said, they felt that it would be impossible for him to govern. And yet he did, despite kind of chronic efforts, whatever was won politics. I think everybody would agree that almost immediately, Jill Stein sued to overturn the election, wrongly charging there were invalid voting machines. And then we had the Emoluments Clause, the Logan Act, the 25th Amendment, the Mueller investigation, the collusion, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, the tax return. But they all had a common theme of let's not wait till 2020, that Trump is so toxic that we have to abort his presidency somehow. And yet they all failed, even though the media was very supportive of him, and even the Never Trump right was critical of their own party nominee and president. I was trying to analyze why all that, how do you make sense of all that? And Trump had a different message, but at this particular time, a lot of people in the country on the conservative side felt that for too long they had played by the Marquis of Queensberry rules in campaigning and replying back to the progressives. And so Trump came along, and at this particular time, people did not want another Bush or McCain or Romney approach to politics. If Reverend Wright was a legitimate issue, then John McCain should have gone after him. That was the feeling. If Candy Crawley grabs that mic in the second debate, then Romney should have jumped up like Ronald Reagan and said, "How dare you do that?" But they didn't. Right. And people wanted some anecdote. And Trump, for all of his uncouthness and crudity, that's what people wanted. They wanted a fighter. They did not want to go out on a limb and support a candidate and then be sawed off by the candidate making fun or disowning his own base. That's what the book tries to do. And it also tries to explain why people hate him so much, whether it's his appearance or his accent or his bluntness or the fact that he doesn't have the usual resume, he doesn't care about the Council on Foreign Relations or the World Bank or the Brookings Institution, or he doesn't call past presidents, wise men and say, President Bush, President Obama, President Carter, President Clinton, give me some advice here. His success so far is almost a referendum on a supposedly essential resume of the past that he didn't have. And that bothers a lot of people, I think.
Hopefully it also inspires a lot of people that, I remember in grade school, people telling me that you can be president, everyone in America can be president, right? And I'm not saying I want to be president, but here I am at 50, not having taken any of the steps that apparently, before President Trump were necessary, the kind of grooming as if it was part of the royal family of England, right? And having the past, He's just demonstrated that all you just have to want it and have a plan that fits better.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And then abroad, I think his Jacksonian or nationalist or principled realism, whatever the term people use to calibrate it is, it's more or less we're going to help our friends and punish our enemies, and we're not going to get involved in areas or theaters that are not central to U.S. interests. U.S. interest is defined as trying to deal with Russia, trying to deal with China, being strong allies of Australia and Israel and Japan and South Korea, and being sort of adversarial to Cuba and Venezuela and Iran. But we're not going to blur those distinctions. We're not going to get into transnational agreements or treaties that are not in our interest, like the Iran deal or the Paris Climate Accord, or if we're going to stay in NATO, we have to ensure that everybody lives up to their promises. And that was quite radical for a president to say and to do that.
It definitely was. You mentioned that he embraced or defended the working people in America's interior, and then you said whom the coastal elite of both parties had come to scorn. Why did they come to scorn the working middle America?
Well, I think part of it was globalization had so enriched the coast, and by that I mean the government in Washington had just exploded in size and compensation, and the banking industry of the East Coast, especially Wall Street, had become global. So they didn't just have 330 million customers, they had 7 billion. And out here where I am in California, Silicon Valley, Google, Facebook, and Apple, along with Hewlett-Packard, I guess, and Yahoo, and Amazon, although it's in Washington, they were now $4 trillion of market capitalization. And our universities like Stanford or Harvard or Yale or Caltech became global universities. And the result was people on this coast here and on the East Coast became so wealthy. They've never seen levels of that wealth. But people in the interior that had muscular labor that could be outsourced or offshored or whatever term we use were impoverished. And the idea was that if you could move a plant where labor was cheaper or a farm where labor was cheaper, they did. And yet the diagnosis of that was backwards. They reversed cause and effect. It was almost as if the elites on the coast said, well, you guys didn't learn coding, or you took opiates, so the jobs left, rather than the jobs left, so you took opiates.
Right.
Or
good point.
Nobody quite said, I like my wood floors, I like my granite counters, I like my stainless steel appliances, I like my arugula, but I don't care about the people who create that for me.
Right.
And Trump came along, of all people, and said, our farmers, our vets, our workers. He went to West Virginia and he said, I love big, beautiful coal. Hillary went there and said, I'm going to shut down this industry. So there was a perception of, I guess it would be called empathy in Trump that nobody had ever imagined he could display, at least display far more than Hillary. He seemed more genuine. He didn't change his accent toward the regional crowd or his appearance. He didn't wear flannel at state fairs. He wore that sort of ridiculous tie, shoes, hair, tan, Queen's accent, wherever he was.
Yeah, good points. Very good points. I interviewed an amazing military veteran, 3-limb amputee, he's just an inspiring guy. But he's leading. You may have heard of him, but he's leading a GoFundMe project that's more than GoFundMe nowadays. But they're building the parts of the wall on private property in Texas because they believe in what the president's doing, and he's having challenges. So they're just pitching in. And I'm not saying that the wall is correct or not correct. What I'm saying is I haven't seen that kind of things happening in previous presidencies that I can think of.
I think that's true. I think the people who voted for Trump, rightly or wrongly, saw that they felt things had accelerated so much into a trajectory they weren't comfortable with. Something had to be done. And by that I mean just 8 or 9 years ago, people could debate gay marriage and then it was permissible. Then if you didn't accept it wholeheartedly, then you were a bigot. Or people thought, abortion should be legal but rare maybe. But then if you didn't sign on to partial birth abortion or even infanticide, then you were diabolical. Or people believed maybe in affirmative action, but suddenly it became reparations. Or maybe they wanted a little bit higher tax rate, 39% under Obama for the wealthy, but then it became a 70 or 90% wealth tax argument or a high income tax bracket argument. And same thing with the green there for, solar panels and wind if the market adjudicates that in a positive way. But suddenly it was the Green Deal. So they saw the country and the left spiraling out of control. And they thought to themselves, I can't sign on to this. This is a good country. Just because it's not perfect doesn't mean that you tear down its statute or change its names. And I don't want to go there anymore. And the Republican Party, whether it's Jeb Bush or whoever, they're not doing anything about it. And Mitt Romney's not going to do anything. But this guy, I'll bring him out of the closet like a gunfighter, like Shane or maybe George Patton or Curtis LeMay, and just turn him loose and confront this. And that's what they did.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Dr. Hanson, I know you have to go, and I appreciate the few minutes you've been able to spend with us. I already put out victorhanson.com, can find all the books and great little snippets about the books. Of course, you can find them on Amazon. What else should the audience know, and where should they go?
They can go to my website that has a link, victorhanson.com, and I have all my writing there, and it's very accessible.
Wonderful. Again, thank you so much for what you've done to preserve American war history. I can't wait to read this most recent book. And again, just thanks for joining our audience.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.